Welcome, Tal Ben-Shahar, to the program. I'm so delighted to have you today, and I'm very grateful for your time because I know you're extremely busy. So thanks for being here.
Well, thank you for the opportunity.
To start with, I just wanted to hear about your definition of happiness.
Right. So, there are many definitions of happiness. The way I define it is that happiness is the combination between meaning and pleasure. So, for example, let's say I work at a place where overall I enjoy my work, I experience pleasure there, and I find it meaningful. It provides me with a sense of purpose or calling. Then I'm happy at work. In a relationship, the same thing. If my relationship is pleasurable, fun, enjoyable, and at the same time meaningful, then it's a happy relationship. It's finding the combination between these two, the meaning and the pleasure.
Okay. So in some of the research that you've explored and done and been teaching, what stands out? I mean, I know there's a lot, but what comes to mind in this moment about something you've learnt that's really impacted your own practice around cultivating happiness in your own life and what you've taught to some of your students?
So a lot of it revolves around the mind-body connection. So, for example, there's a lot of research showing how regular physical exercise has the same effect on our well-being as our most powerful psychiatric medication. So regular exercise, at the very least 3 times a week for 30 to 40 minutes each time. In addition, meditation, mindfulness actually changes the way our brain functions, making us more resilient in the face of painful emotions, more receptive to pleasurable, to joyful emotions. In addition, relationships. Relationships are the #1 predictor of happiness. If you look at the happiest countries in the world, the one common element there is social support, whether it's in the context of the family or friendships. So relationships are key.
And so honing down a bit now, so you've mentioned a few different categories that obviously contribute to our happiness. You talk a lot about gratitude and gratitude practices within the context of positive psychology. What's the research around gratitude? Is there a lot of research that actually supports that this practice is enhancing our happiness? And what practices do you do yourself, or do you advise people to do?
Right. So the area of gratitude is probably the most researched area in positive psychology. From a simple practice such as writing down the things for which we're grateful before going to bed every day, or even once a week. We do it as a family, so we go around the table every Friday night, which is when we all get together with my parents and grandmother, and each person, one by one, says what they're grateful for from the week. It's a wonderful practice to introduce to a family meal. In addition, and this is hot off the press, research done by Dr. Dina Neer shows that gratitude doesn't just help when we look at the past, being grateful for what happened during the week or during the day. It's also when we look into the future. So her study was about showing that people who each night think about 3 things that they're looking forward to the next day. It could be a meal with a friend, it could be something at work, it could be a workout, whatever it is. Some 3 things at least that they're looking forward to. These people were less pessimistic, less depressed, and they were more resilient. So
Right.
looking backwards, being grateful, and looking forward has a positive effect on our psychological well-being.
That's a fascinating addition because the practice of looking backwards I do myself, and I find it very powerful. But interesting to hear that there's research around the future projection of what you're grateful for.
Right, so I've started to add that to my personal practice every day. At least 3 things I'm looking forward to. Even if I have a difficult day ahead, there are things that we can find that we are looking forward to, that we are excited about, even if they're small.
Yeah, absolutely. So we can do practices to enhance our happiness that are quite conscious and intentional, but there are things that also get in the way of our happiness, and they can be sort of circumstantial or internal. How do you, in positive psychology, when difficult emotions come up, how does that fit into the picture of how do we manage this jealousy, self-doubt, fear?
Yeah, let me share a personal story with you. When I started to teach a class on happiness, I remember I was having lunch one day in one of the undergraduate dorms at Harvard, and a student came to me and said, Tal, may I join you for lunch? And I said, sure. And he sat down and then he said, Tal, I hear you're teaching a class on happiness. And I said, yeah, that's right, on positive psychology. And he said, my roommates are taking your class. And I said, that's wonderful. And then he said the following. He said, but Tal, now that you're teaching a class on happiness, you've got to watch out. And I said, what? And he said, Tal, you've got to be careful. And I said, why? And he said, because if I see you unhappy, I'll tell my roommates. And I actually used that the following day in class. And I told my students, the last thing in the world I want you to think is that I experience a constant high, am always happy, or that you, by the end of the year, will always be happy. Because there are only two kinds of people who do not experience painful emotions, such as sadness or anger or jealousy. Two kinds of people. The first kind that don't experience these painful emotions are the psychopaths. The second type are dead. So, if we experience these painful emotions at times, it's actually a good sign. It means we're not psychopathic and we're alive. It's a good place to start. The problem today, though, is that many people think that a happy life is about being happy all the time. That the good life is a life that is devoid of painful or unpleasant emotions. And that is not true. And that is perhaps the number one barrier to happiness, because if my expectation is that I will always be happy, if my expectation is that I will never experience envy toward my friend or sadness in the face of loss or failure, then I'm opening myself up to a lot of unhappiness. Mm-hmm. The first thing is to give ourselves the permission to be human. And to be human means to experience the full range of human emotions, the pleasurable as well as the painful. Mm. Moreover, when we experience these painful emotions, paradoxically, it opens us up to more pleasurable emotions. Why? Because all emotions flow through the same pipeline. So if I block this pipeline and don't allow an emotion such as sadness or envy to flow through me, I'm inadvertently also blocking the pleasurable emotions such as joy or love. Whereas when I allow the emotions to flow through me, whether it's in the form of tears or in the form of writing about these emotions or talking to someone about them, then I'm also opening myself up to the joyful, pleasurable emotions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You wrote a fabulous book called The Pursuit of Perfect, and this talks about perfectionism and how perfectionism can get in the way of happiness. And you talk in that book about the concept of the perfectionist versus the optimalist. Could you talk a little bit about this idea of the perfectionist versus the optimalist and how this impacts on our happiness?
So here I'm talking from the perspective of both research as well as from personal experience, being a recovering perfectionist. Perfectionist or perfectionism comes in the... Let me start that again. I want a perfect answer. No, I'm just kidding. Let me continue.
Oh my God,
Let me continue.
I need to have a giggle so that we can get the giggle out. Okay, that's great. It's funny, isn't it, when you have the option of an edit? It's a nightmare for a perfectionist. There you go. Yeah.
But you don't need to edit this. You can actually leave this on. It's fine. I've come to terms with the fact that I will not come up with a perfect answer. The reason why perfectionism does get in the way of happiness is because for a perfectionist, nothing is good enough. So even a great meditation session is not good enough. Even a great achievement, it could always be improved. Or what about the following achievement, which I haven't yet attained? Nothing is good enough, which is the opposite mindset to meditation. Because meditation, being mindful, is accepting everything that is around us, which is a good thing because it means that also meditation and mindfulness is the antidote to perfectionism. So if I can meditate regularly and each time, let's say I lose my concentration, just say, oops, I lost my concentration. No big deal. What I'm doing is I'm actually practicing a healthier, more accepting mindset, which will help me not just in my meditation practice. It will help me in my relationships. It will help me in my work, my school, wherever perfectionism, the nothing is good enough mindset comes in the way. I hope this was a good enough answer.
Yes, fabulous, nearly perfect. So can I just ask you about what the just this shift of this, the optimalist that you talk about, so what that actually means, because I thought it was really interesting, this concept.
Right. So the shift from perfectionism to optimalism is not a shift from being a hardworking, ambitious, interested in success to a person who just doesn't care. Not at all. An optimist can really care about doing well, can be extremely ambitious and hardworking. The difference, though, is their perception of failure. For a perfectionist, failure is a disaster. For an optimalist, failure is an opportunity. It doesn't mean that I love failure or that I even enjoy failure. However, as an optimalist, I learn to see failure as a learning opportunity, as a stepping stone. Moreover, an optimalist not just accepts failure, also accepts painful emotions, gives him or herself the permission to be human. And finally, also related to what we discussed, an optimalist is grateful for what she or he have, because an optimalist doesn't look at what is missing, oh, this is not good enough, but more at what already exists, what they can be grateful for, what they can appreciate.
Mm-hmm. So it's again this quite conscious looking at what they have and what is there, rather than what is not there and not good enough.
Yes, looking at the full part of the glass, and having just said that, a lot of the ideas in positive psychology are commonsensical ideas. Look at the full part of the glass, exercise regularly, appreciate what you have rather than take it for granted, spend time with your loved ones, relationships, learn from failure. I mean, these are commonsensical ideas. But as the French philosopher Voltaire once said, common sense is not that common. Especially when it comes to application. So the key is to take these commonsensical ideas and to make them more common in our lives and in the lives of those around us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So how do you actually maintain these practices? Like, how do you remember to do this and sort of orientate yourself in this way?
Right. So the biggest challenge with a lot of these commonsensical ideas is not understanding them. It's not knowing them. It's remembering to apply them. And for that, we need reminders. One reminder that I have, and I don't know if you can see it on the screen, but I have a bracelet here, which is a reminder bracelet. And every month or so, I use it for a whole month to remind me of different things. So, for example, right now it's reminding me to be playful. 2 months ago it was there to remind me to be mindful. So each time, I would look at it, I would remember, okay, be present, be mindful. Each time I look at it now, introduce more playfulness, whether it's to an interview, whether it's time with my kids, whether it's when I work. And having these small reminders in a bracelet, we can have it on our Outlook, or on our to remind us constantly on our screensaver, on our walls, wherever it is. Having these reminders is critical to get us into the habit of doing something, the habit of being mindful or playful or nice to people, whatever it is that we're working on.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I like this bracelet. I'm going to have to invest in one. And is it do you have different ones for different themes, or it's just the one, and then you?
It's a string that I got from my daughter, and so I also remember her when I see it, which is an added bonus.
Great. Can you share something of what you're currently focused on, or where your energy is at the moment in terms of your work?
Sure. So I'm looking a lot at the effect of technology on well-being, and it's a two-sided issue, because on the one hand, technology is wonderful. I mean, the fact that we're able to interact now, the fact that you're watching me now, this is technology. There wouldn't be the kind of access that we have today to ideas, to books, to people. I just heard from a childhood friend whom I haven't been in touch with for over 30 years, thanks to technology. On the other hand, technology can also really draw us in and take over our life. And there can be, just like with chocolate, there can be too much of a good thing. And unfortunately today, people are losing touch, and I'm not talking about this metaphorically. They're losing touch with other people, and unfortunately, 1,000 friends on Facebook are no substitute for that one BFF, best friend forever. So it's important to have that. That kind of intimacy, togetherness, where we talk face to face, where we hug, where we play together in the sandbox. And we shouldn't lose that, because as I've mentioned, relationships, and I'm talking about real relationships, not virtual relationships, real relationships are the number one predictor of happiness. So embrace the people in your life. Spend time with them, whether it's having meals together or just hanging out, but be together.
When you refer to the relationships as being the number one predictor, what kinds of, is there specific research that comes to mind around that you could share?
Sure. So there's a lot of research on national level happiness, looking at the happiest countries in the world. And on that list, the top 10 are some countries that one wouldn't expect to find, whereas lower down on the list are also countries that one wouldn't expect to find. So for the wealthiest countries in the world are generally not there. The US is not at the top, England is not at the top, Germany is not there, Korea or Japan are not there. The countries that are time and time again, the top of the list are countries like Australia, countries like Colombia in South America, countries like Israel, Costa Rica, Denmark. And when you look at these countries, when researchers looked at the unique distinguishing characteristic of these countries, it was just one thing. It was relationships, or more generally, social support. Do you feel that you have people who are looking out for you? That you have people that you feel you can share with? In other words, people, you can also feel that you can give yourself the permission to be human around. Whether it's family or friends, whether it's your mate, whatever it is, it's this intimacy, this closeness, again, not virtual, real closeness, that makes all the difference on the individual level, on the organizational level, as well as on the national level.
That's really fascinating that research has come out to show that is the distinguishing feature. Really, really interesting.
The only distinguishing feature.
Very, very fascinating. So, on the topic of relationship, are there any practices that positive psychology talks about that we can bring into relationships, given the fact that it's such an important part of our happiness?
Right, a lot, and let me just mention a couple of them. So the first one, which is coming straight from the research on appreciation or gratitude, is to appreciate our partner, not to take for granted the people we're with. I often say when I speak to an audience, I say that I know exactly, being a researcher, I know exactly what the problem is in your relationship. The problem is that your partner is not perfect. There's another problem, though, and that is that your partner's partner is not perfect either. And, so we get together, two imperfect beings, trying to make the best of it. And it's very difficult to make the best of it, to build a healthy relationship if we take for granted, do not appreciate what there is to appreciate about our partner. So that's the first thing. And this is what a healthy couple, whether it's a romantic relationship or friends or family, they don't take for granted one another. They appreciate. My wife and I have a regular practice where I tell her, Tommy, what I appreciate about you is, and she tells me, Tal, what I appreciate about you is, and we'll list those things. Even when we go through challenging periods in our relationship, which we do like every relationship does. So first of all, it's appreciation. Also with your friends or with your kids or with your parents, nobody's perfect. At the same time, there is a lot that we can appreciate in each and every person. Number one. Number two, authenticity in relationships. That's so important for the development of long-term relationship. Obviously, when we go on a first date or even a 10th date, we're not fully open and authentic. We show our best side to them. But after a while, if we want to build the relationship, take it beyond the superficial level, we have to open up, and that means we have to also open up our less pretty sides, or open up our pretty sides and be our full wonderful self. Be it all. And this authenticity leads to more intimacy, and over time, in romantic relationships, it actually leads to more passion. In friendships, it leads to a closer connection. Even as a teacher, I see how authenticity affects my ability to connect with the students, the satisfaction of the students, as well as their ability to relate and to apply ideas in their lives. So authenticity applies to romantic relationships, to professional relationships, to family relationships, and to friendships. Being real. Now, it's not always easy to be real, because when we expose ourselves, when we open ourselves up, we also open ourselves up to being hurt. Because, if someone doesn't like my inauthentic self, then okay, so they don't like someone else. But if someone doesn't like my authentic self, they don't like me, and that's threatening. However, while there is a cost to authenticity, to opening up, there is a much higher cost to inauthenticity, to remaining closed.
Great, thank you. Can you recommend a book that you've read, apart from the wonderful books you've written yourself, that has really offered you some new and stimulating perspectives? And then there might be thousands, but one that comes to mind, and what you drew from it.
Okay, so how about three?
Sure,
Very
go
difficult
for
me
it.
to think
I'll
of
take
one.
three.
All right. So the first one is a book called You're Not Your Brain by Jeffrey Schwartz. It's a wonderful book about creating real deep change on the neural level. So he talks about mindfulness, combining it with cognitive therapy, and a book that one can apply to one's life. It's a book that changed my life. The second book that changed my relationship for the better is a book by David Schnarch called Passionate Marriage. It's relevant for romantic relationship. It's also relevant for any other relationship, whether it's with your kids or with your friends. And the final one, which is a book without which we wouldn't be talking now, because it's a book that convinced me that my calling, my passion in life was to be a teacher, is a book called The Marva Collins Way. The Marva Collins Way. It's about Marva Collins, who was a school teacher in inner city Chicago and changed the lives of thousands of students, myself being one of them.
Great, thank you. Is there a particular study or something that you've come across either a long time ago or recently that's really kind of impressed you in terms of how important a particular thing is for our well-being or happiness?
Yeah, so what I like about positive psychology in general as a field is that it's research-based. Because you see, people have talked about happiness for thousands of years. Confucius spoke about it, Aristotle spoke about it. But what we have now, for the first time really, is a science of happiness. So everything that I discussed, from relationships to gratitude to physical exercise to mindfulness, everything is research-based. Let me just add one study which I haven't mentioned before, and that is one conducted by one of my favorite positive psychologists in the world, and that is Sonia Lyubomirsky. Sonia Lyubomirsky is a professor at UC Riverside, has done research on kindness. And what she has found is that committing to acts of kindness in addition to those you normally do. So a simple instruction such as add 5 more acts of kindness during the coming week significantly increases levels of well-being and happiness. And that again, by the way, goes to the relationship between happiness and other people. Just like relationships contribute a great deal to happiness. So is doing good for other people, volunteering, helping other people. One more study in the same area of doing for other people. They did this. This is a joint project between University of British Columbia, Canada, and Harvard Business School. And what they did was they gave people a sum of money, and they said to them, go spend it. Go have fun with it. You know, go buy a gadget or new shoes, whatever you want. Enjoy. And they measured their levels of happiness before they were given the money and after they spent the money. And what they found was that their levels of happiness went up. In other words, there was a shopper's high. You know, this is very important research. This is the first time in recorded history where you have proof for Carrie Bradshaw's theory from Sex and the City that buying shoes actually makes you happier. The problem there, though, is that they measured their happiness levels again the day after, and it went back to where it was before. So shopper's high, temporary happiness doesn't last. And then they brought in a second group of people, and they gave them the same amount of money, and they told them, go spend it. Just like they told the first group, go spend it, though, on someone else. They could give it to a homeless person. They could buy a gift for their partner. They could donate it to charity. And they measured their levels of happiness before and after. And the effect was the exact same effect as the first group, with one major difference. The effect, some of the effect, was still there a day later and up to a week later. In other words, giving is receiving. One of the best ways to increase our levels of happiness is to commit acts of kindness, to volunteer, to help, to donate, to contribute.
Well, that is a beautiful link to the program that we're doing this month, which is really all about cultivating something good for yourself through mindfulness and learning about happiness and contributing and helping to raise funds for clean water in the developing world. So I'm glad that you raised that piece of research to motivate all of us to give and be kind.
And to thank all of you for being kind and for contributing. Thank you very much.
So I just now to round up the interview, as I said, I'll put a link to your website so people know where to get your books and so forth. I'm going to just ask you one final question, then open it to you if there's anything you want to add. So the final question is, what piece of advice would you have for your 20-year younger self? Take your time.
The first thing, yes. What I would say to myself is to look at the research out there on well-being and adopt one or at most two new practices and apply them in my life religiously as a ritual, day in and day out, whether it's the gratitude, whether it's the physical exercise, whether it's committing acts of kindness, but doing something persistently on an ongoing basis.
Thank you.
Because the key to happiness is not knowing how to become happiness, it's doing what is necessary to become happiness.